Hello, I was 25 years old, lived in Cleveland, and worked as a graphic designer for a mid-sized marketing agency downtown. The job was okay and the income was adequate, but I was exhausted from working long hours, drinking poor coffee, and dealing with excessive stress. Then came the stomach problems, the weariness, and the weight loss that didn't feel like a success. The next thing I knew, I was sitting in a drab hospital room with beige wallpaper that never looks clean, being told I'd require regular infusions and follow-ups for the next few months. So I became a frequent patient at St. Vincent's Medical Center. Every Wednesday, the same hallway leads to the same windowless room with four poles and reclining chairs. The cafeteria was small and unpretentious, with a few tables, a counter with pastries that looked nicer than they tasted, and a short order cook who always appeared to want to be somewhere. And there is where I met her, Angela. She wasn't a doctor, she just worked the food line during lunch. She had a white uniform with a slightly crooked name tag and her dark auburn hair pulled back into a lazy bun. She appeared to be in her late 30s or early 40s, not the kind of beauty that strikes you straight away, but the kind that grows on you and becomes the only face you notice in a crowd. At first, I was simply another patient wearing a hospital bracelet and looking fatigued. The first time she delivered me coffee with no sugar or milk, just the way I ordered it with a friendly, "Are you okay today, hon?" That made me pause. She wasn't faking her smile. That was unusual. I started sitting near the counter. Not for the coffee, but because she was always talking. Not major things, just little conversation about the weather, the price of eggs, and the terrible music playing via the overhead speakers. But it felt real. It felt like someone saw me, not just my disease. "You always wear the hoodie," she said once, referring to my tattered Cleveland brown sweater. "It's my kind of thing." I shrugged. "Wear what makes you comfortable. I believe it is going apart," she teased. "Like me." I grinned. We both laughed a little too hard at such a ridiculous line. But it was the moment. Something shifted. It was simply a small click, like a door slowly unlocking. I didn't realize it at the time, but that was when the actual narrative began. By the third week, I had stopped pretending it was all about the appointments. I'd arrive early, take a seat in the waiting room outside the infusion wing, and wait for the clock to reach noon Angela's shift. The nurses began recognizing me. "Do you like to be early?" one said with a knowing expression. I simply shrugged and grinned. It wasn't about arriving early, it was about her. Angela began recalling my usuals: turkey sandwich with mild mayo and no tomato. Even after lunch, I drank black coffee. And every time I stepped into that cafeteria, she would lift her chin slightly as if she was both astonished and expecting me. "Are you back already, Hoodie?" she commented once, laughing as she placed down my coffee. "I can't stay away," I added, trying to keep my voice light. She raised an eyebrow but said nothing, just handed me the tray and returned to wipe off the counter. That day I sat more closer than usual. There was a gap in the lunch rush, and I noticed her leaning on her elbows and checking something on her phone. She appeared fatigued in a way that went beyond work, as if she'd had to be tough for too long. "Do you ever get a break around here?" I asked. She looked up. "Is it a real one?" "Not really. Do you want to sit?" She hesitated as if the notion had never occurred to her, but she loosened her apron, sat into the booth across from me, and said, "I only have 10 minutes." 10 changed became 20. We started talking about silly stuff, like terrible cafeteria food patients who complained about everything and the unusually warm weather in October. But suddenly things shifted. She told me about her 14-year-old son Alex, who is temperamental and plays guitar but refuses instruction. About her ex-husband who relocated to Florida and sends Christmas cards without signing them. About her personal migraines, which she never addresses at work. I listened. Not out of pity, but just because I wanted to know. Her reality felt so anchored and different from mine. She was not chasing anything. She just showed up. Every day. For everyone. I started anticipating Wednesdays like they were holidays, not for treatment. For her. As she stood to leave, she gave me a long look and added, "You remind me of someone I used to know. Is someone good or bad?" She smiled. The type who stayed around too long, even when he didn't need to. I wasn't sure what that meant at the moment, but it stayed with me. That night as I laid in bed, I realized I didn't just enjoy talking to her, I liked her. I enjoyed the way she saw people, how she recognized minor details, and the calm humor in her voice. More than that, I like how I felt while I was with her, as if I were more than a patient. Perhaps for the first time in a long time, I was not alone. It began with a favor. I had just finished my weekly infusion, and the nurse informed me that I needed to return the next day for some additional blood work that they had forgotten to schedule. It felt like a hassle, and I'd already planned my week around Wednesday, but I didn't complain. I just nodded, pulled on my hoodie, and departed. So the next day, Thursday, I went back to St. Vincent's. Thursdays bring a different energy. Quieter, less crowded. Even the vending machines seemed to hum less in the hallway. When I strolled by the cafeteria, I didn't expect to see Angela. I assumed her shift would have ended by then. But there she was behind the counter, wiping off trays, sleeves rolled up to her elbows, and the same crooked name tag clinging to her collar as before. She looked up and blinked with surprise. "You again?" She stated, not in an unfriendly manner. "I didn't expect to see you until next week." "Me neither," I responded, taking a step closer. "They messed up my lab results. They told me to come back." Angela shakes her head. "That sounds about right." She threw the towel over her shoulder. "Do you want coffee?" "It's late, but I'm not telling." I nodded and she poured me a cup. The cafeteria was virtually empty, with only the janitor in the corner and a woman browsing through a magazine near the window. We sat at the end booth just like before. This time she didn't bother checking the clock. "Do you ever tire of this place?" I asked. Angela leaned back. "Every day. But this is a job. Pays what needs to be paid." Her voice sounded heavy. Not bitterness, but something established. A peaceful acceptance. "Do you ever do things for yourself?" I asked. "Like not for your child, not for work. Just for you." She stopped and then laughed. What a question. "No, I suppose I don't. I didn't mean to, but I said it anyway." "Then allow me to take you out sometime." Angela remained still. Her fingers delicately touched the rim of her paper cup. "Sean, that's lovely. But I am 13 years older than you," I noticed. She smirked slightly. "Isn't that a deal breaker?" "Not even close." She looked at me, her gaze fixed and unreadable. And then to my amazement, she replied, "I'll be off tomorrow at 5. That was it. No promises. No nervous laughter. Just a simple introduction. The next day, Friday, I arrived outside the hospital entrance. I had no idea what to anticipate, but when Angela walked out wearing jeans boots and a charcoal coat instead of scrubs or an apron, she looked different. Not younger, but more herself. We went to a small cafe near the lake with vinyl booths and a jukebox that still played with coins. We discussed her favorite movies, her youth in Akron, and her desire of one day having a plant business. I told her about my unfinished graphic novel, which I would never show anyone. About how in high school I would skip class to take buses to areas I'd never been. When we walked out, it was already dark. Wind from the lake is harsh and cold. I offered her my hoodie as a joke. She laughs and shakes her head. Then she stared at me for a second too long. "I haven't done anything like this in a long time," she admitted gently. I said, "Neither do I." She said nothing else. She just put her hand into mine as if it were the most normal thing in the world. And there on a cold Cleveland night, standing beneath a flickering street lamp, I recognized we had crossed a line. Neither of us stated it aloud, but we both knew we were not going back. This was Angela's idea. We were seated on her living room couch one wet Tuesday evening. Her son was with a friend, the TV was on silent, and I had one sock half off, stretched out and too relaxed to move. She gazed at me while twirling the stem of her wineglass between her fingers. "Have you ever been to Geneva on the lake?" she asked suddenly. I blinked. "I cannot claim I have." "Then we're going," she announced, getting up as if it were already determined. 2 days later on Thursday, we drove away. Geneva is only about an hour east, a small lakeside town with old cafes, arcades, wineries, and a quiet charm that you don't notice until you're older or tired enough. We took her automobile. I let her drive. She claimed that it was her treat. It was early spring, and the trees were just starting to bloom, but the lakes remained steel gray and restless. The town was virtually vacant. It was too early for tourists. But the air felt fresh and keen, as if it knew we were there to breathe something unusual. We ate lunch at Eddie's Grill, which had checkered tablecloths, greasy fries, and old images of Elvis on the walls. Angela requested a cheeseburger with no pickles. I got a chili dog that I immediately regretted. We sat near the window watching the waves through a smudged glass pane. She kept one hand wrapped around her coffee mug and the other near to mine on the table, but they never touched. "Do you ever wish you could start over?" she asked. "Do you want a fresh start?" She nodded. No hospital shifts, no exes, no bills or custody on weekends. Simply pick a location on the map and go. I thought about it. "Yes," I said, "but only if I can have you with me." She smiled softly and privately. That's the kind of smile you don't share with anyone. Later, we strolled down the beach. The majority of the businesses were still boarded up for the season, but the arcade was open. We walked inside, illuminated by the brightness of antique equipment and the odor of popcorn that never seemed fresh. She challenged me to play air hockey, beat me 3 games in a row, laughing the entire time. I believe that's when I noticed that version of her who didn't fit into employment, parenthood, or duties. Just a woman present in the moment, allowing herself to be a little irresponsible. We stayed at a tiny inn that overlooked the lake. Technically speaking, 2 rooms are separate. I'm not sure why we kept up that small bit of formality. Perhaps out of habit or dread? Perhaps to trick ourselves. But that night, after brushing teeth in adjacent sinks and exchanging lingering goodnights at the door, she kissed me, soft and certain, without hesitation. Only lips and breath and the warmth of her hands against my face. She didn't say anything else. She just looked at me as if she had been keeping something back for too long before finally letting go. I slept in her bed that night. She left the window cracked so we fell asleep to the sound of waves lapping the shore. We did not discuss what had transpired the following morning. We had breakfast, poured coffee, overcooked toast, then drove home with the radio turned down and the windows down. Her hand is on the shifter. My fingers brush against hers now and then. There was no plan. There was no discussion of what this was or where it was heading. But there was something in the silence that conveyed more than any words could. Something that stated, for the time being, we are here. And that's it. We never discussed labels. Never sat down and attempted to describe what was going on between us. But something changed after Geneva. Subtle at first. She began messaging me, "Good morning." I began bringing her favorite food, the small chocolate-covered almonds that she always pretended not to enjoy. I saw how her voice softened around me, and she began to notice when my stomach flared up, encouraging me to sit rather than dispute. There was something soothing about how easily we slipped into each other's lives. Angela did not pretend to be someone else around me. She let her tiredness show. When she was upset, she didn't pretend to grin. And I enjoyed it. I appreciated that I didn't need to be strong, charming, or witty. I could just be there. The hospital appointments resumed, and I consistently showed up early. We would meet at the cafeteria at the same booth. Some days we didn't say much. Some days we laughed like children, and some days we simply sat. Quiet. Comfortable. Outside those boundaries, however, the world continued to spin. We spent one evening in her kitchen. Her son Alex was in his room with his guitar turned low. I was leaning against the counter and drinking a beer. She was chopping veggies for a stir-fry, her hair messed up, no makeup, and one of my old hoodies draped over her shoulders as if it belonged to her. "You should talk to him," she stated abruptly. I frowned. "Alex," she nodded. "He is aware that something is going on. He isn't a kid anymore." I shifted. "Are you sure it is time?" She paused. "I do not know, but I do not wish to hide you." The remarks had a deeper impact than I had anticipated. I hadn't realized how much I'd been hoping she'd say that as a quiet vote of confidence. So I tried. The following time I came over, I knocked on his door. "Hello," I said. "Can I come inside?" He looked up from his guitar and shrugged. Sure, it was not easy. I did not want to overstep. I didn't want to be that strange guy invading his life. But I told him the truth. I cared about his mom. I was not looking to replace anyone. I said I'd stay if he let me. He didn't say much, just nodded and inquired whether I played guitar. I didn't, but I asked if he might teach me sometime. That seems to break the ice. Angela smiled when I told her later. He said he had not smiled like that in weeks. That night after Alex had gone to bed, she nestled up next to me on the couch blanket, covering our legs, and her fingers drawing light patterns on my forearm. "You're fine with him," she whispered. "I am trying." She kissed my shoulder. "It is more than I expected. More than I expected to get again." I didn't know what to say, so I kissed her forehead and held her closer. But even as we dug deeper into each other, I could sense something moving beneath the surface. She began working longer shifts. I started to feel fatigued and distracted. Maybe the therapies were catching up. Perhaps the regularity was settling and dampening the spark. Whatever it was, we did not discuss it. Not yet. We just kept pushing forward, praying that the silence would not turn to distance. It was my idea this time. Angela had been stretched thin between Job Alex's schoolwork and a plumbing disaster that flooded half of her laundry room. I could tell it was wearing on her even when she tried to hide it with jokes. "Let's go out of town." I stated this one night as we were folding laundry on her couch. She glanced at me skeptically. "Where will we go, Hocking Hills, just for this weekend?" "I will book the cabin. No hospital, no sirens, and no emails, it's just us." She paused for a second too long, and I assumed she would answer no, but then she nodded. "Okay, it's just us." We departed Friday afternoon. The drive took many hours passing through the state's forested southern region where the trees were taller and the roads were calmer. The air smelled like moss and wood smoke. By the time we arrived at the cabin, dusk had settled. It wasn't really fancy, just a two-bedroom house with creaky floors and a stone fireplace, but it felt like something out of time. We didn't do much that night except cook pasta, drink a bottle of wine, and sit on the porch covered in a blanket listening to the wind rustle the trees. Angela snuggled into me warm and quiet. "You ever consider leaving Cleveland?" she asked. I shrugged. "Sometimes. But I've never had a big enough reason." She didn't respond. She just sipped her wine and watched the trees. The next day we went hiking. Nothing tough, simply a walk through Ash Cave and up to Cedar Falls. Angela wore my old hoodie again, and I couldn't stop looking at her. Not because she appeared younger or dressed differently, but in the silence of the woods, she appeared light, untethered, like she remembered how it felt to breathe. We ate lunch on a bench facing the waterfall, sandwiches covered in foil, hands slightly cold, knees touching. "I used to come here with my parents," she explained, "before everything became complex, prior to reaching adulthood." I said, "Exactly." She gazed at me with something in her eyes, something deeper than warmth. A type of fear, perhaps. Or awareness. "Sean, we're different. I understand. I mean, you could do anything. Dating someone your own age. Plan your life." I took her hand. "I am not interested in someone else. I'm here. With you." She did not draw away, but she did not respond either. That night back at the cabin, we made love with the calm desperation that comes with realizing you're on borrowed time. Not in a sad manner. Simply real. Honest. Like two people forcing themselves into memory, attempting to slow down something that was already moving. She fell asleep with her head on my chest, breathing slowly and steadily. I remained up for a long, staring at the ceiling and listening to the night. There was no major fight, no nasty words, but I felt it. Something unspoken is building between us, something unavoidable. She was sliding back into her world, and I was still standing on the porch, knocking, unsure whether I would be let in again. We did not break up. There was no slammed door farewell message or sobbing goodbye. It's just space, a steady unwinding. A quiet turn away. It began with small things. Angela received a promotion at the hospital. Not a big one, but enough to change her schedule and add extra meetings to her nights. I tried to be happy for her, and for the most part I was. However, it meant fewer mornings at the cafe and fewer quiet Thursdays at her home. Then I started freelancing on the side, taking on modest design projects from friends of friends. It offered me something to focus on while also helping to pay off the rising treatment expenditures. However, it gradually drew me into my own orbit. We could still see each other, still texting, still receiving calls. But even our messages were shorter, less warm, more, "Hi, I'm running late," or "Have you eaten?" "Then I miss you." One night I unexpectedly stopped by her house. She opened the door in slippers, phone in hand, her hair in a hasty twist that indicated she wasn't expecting anyone. Her smile was pleasant yet slightly strained. "Hello," I said sheepishly, holding up a bag of takeout. "I thought I would surprise you." She allowed me in. We ate in the kitchen, sitting side by side at the counter like two individuals who were once something more. Alex did not come out of his room that night. She did not call for him, and I didn't ask. After supper, she cleaned the dishes while I dried. It felt familiar, comfortable, but I could feel the gulf between us, unseen but definite. Later we sat on the sofa, no blanket. No leaning in. She glanced at me with tired eyes. Do you ever feel as if we're just waiting for something to end? I didn't respond. Not because I didn't have a response, because I have too many. I do not want to hurt you. She added, You're fine, Sean. You were exactly what I needed when I had no idea I needed anything. I swallowed hard. You were that for me too, she nodded. Perhaps we are just at different phases right now. I didn't spend the night. There was no great cause. Simply a peaceful knowing. I kissed her cheek before departing. She did not ask me to stay. I did not ask if she wanted me to. The subsequent weeks were a blur. Work, checkups, days that melt into one another. I stopped visiting the hospital cafeteria. She stopped texting initially. I did not delete her phone number. I stopped looking for her name on my screen. I do not think any of us intended to let it go. It's just happened. Like a fire that runs out of wood flickering rather than roaring, then quiet. A year later, I drove past the hospital by accident. I was on my way to meet a client when I made a wrong turn, and there it was, St. Vincent's, still beige and boxy, standing as if it had been frozen in the very moment I left it. I did not stop. I just slowed down enough to see the cafeteria sign the parking lot was half full, and a nurse was pushing a cart across the entry. And I thought of her. However, it wasn't a sharp thought. It's not the same as it was before. More like something soft and distant, as if it had been sun-bleached and tucked away in a drawer. I hadn't spoken with Angela in months. No squabbles, no drama, just life continuing on. I changed my phone number after receiving a new plan. She's undoubtedly noticed. Perhaps she didn't. Perhaps she had something bigger and louder. I relocated to a new flat on the west side. I finished my treatment course and received a clean scan. My doctor shook my hand as if we were running a marathon together. What about the hoodie I used to wear every week? It is currently folded and stored in a box. Not thrown away, just put away. Sometimes when the light strikes the wall just right in the late afternoon, I recall what it was like to wake up next to her. Her hair was warm on my chest and her breathing had a calm pattern. But I can't remember what we talked about, or what we battled about, or if we actually did. That's the trouble with individuals who alter you, they don't always remain. They might come and go like seasons in your life. They color things for a while and then leave, not erased, just complete. I met someone new a few months ago. She is kind, thoughtful, funny in the way it sneaks up on you. She is unaware of Angela. I never brought it up. Not because I am hiding something, but because that aspect of myself no longer requires explanation. Angela is presumably still working at the hospital. Perhaps she has finally opened the plant business of her dreams. Perhaps she is with someone new, someone better suited to her lifestyle. Maybe she's fine with being alone. We do not talk, we don't text. We do not follow each other wherever. But if I ever met her again in a market on the street or at a passing moment, I believe I would smile. Not because I expect anything back, simply because she mattered once. In some ways, I believe I also matter. That is enough. Not all stories end in heartache or forever. Some simply end. And that's fine.